Now let me look at, if at all I have to create a new form to enter a player data. Let's say this is my player data, right? Probably I'll look at sheet 1. This is my master data of the player. Now what I would like is a new match has occurred. I want a data entry to happen. I mean, not pulled from some other source. Let's say I have a data entry happening, right? So I would like to create a new form, a form which will contain probably the name of the player, runs code, all this stuff. You enter the data into that form, press the submit button. That data should come and inputted in 8862. The next data should come and inputted into 8863 and something like that. Right? That is what is my intention, let's say. Getting it? I want to drive it more through a form. Right? Alright. So let's try that out. If I want to create a user form, probably I don't want someone to enter directly here. I want them to enter it into a form. The way I can create a user form in VBA is through this. Insert, I can say user form. This will create a new form. So you see, this is the way the form lies. Probably you drag it to whatever extent you want. So this is the big form. Right? On this form, you can ask the person to actually enter the data. Right? We'll create probably player name. So some kind of, just like the way you fill some other form, we'll create something on this so that and link it to our Excel sheet. Right? So this form also, you see the name is showing as user form 1. Some properties if we see, right? Or this name itself, I'll change it probably as player data. Instead of user form 1, let me call it as player data. Right? And the background color, if you want, you change it to all your likings. You put a palette, you change the background color of your form, right? The border colors, you can just play around. The look and feel of your form, you can simply play around, right? The caption of the form is what is actually visible here, right? So the caption of the form, I'll say player match data, something. Player match data is what I'm saying, right? And probably if all something more, what font it is required, right? All that stuff. If you want a separate font and all, you can think through that, right? You can very well play around with that stuff, right? Let's say I want to create such kind of a font. All those things I'll modify, and even the font color. Let's say I'm modifying all these things, the height, the width, everything of the form. Scroll bars, should they be visible or not? The left scrolling and right scrolling, should I allow it or not? Right? The pictures, if they are there anything on the form or not, all those things, I can very well set it. So this is my form. Now let's say someone is double clicking on this form. A code comes. So when someone is clicking on that form, what should happen? It should be shown up as a form. So I'll say whatever is the name of the form, player data is the name of the form, dot show. Simply show that form. Whenever you double click on it, I'll say simply show that form. Now you see, I select this. Okay. This is the form. I run this now. This comes out as my form. Right? When I run this is the form. Now I'll try to fill some data onto the form. The way I would like to fill the data, probably I need to enter a player name. Right? So I'll say these are the different controls I can put on that form. So this is like a label. Right? So I'll select this label and I put a label entry here. And this label, probably I'll call it as player name. Enter the player name. Okay, so it comes out as player name, right? And probably if required, I'll even capture a few more things like that. Just like the player name, just below the player name, I will write it as runs. Whatever is the runs CS code. What else do we have on our Excel sheet? What all are these things? Run status, whether he is out or not out. Right? So status, I'll put one more. If required, I'll change it later. But I will maintain one more thing called status here, which will contain out and not out. Then similarly, if required, I'll enter all these. These are all the same way. I'm not doing anything much into that. Opposition. I'll put one more thing for opposition. So the same way I'll copy probably the opposition, which country, against which country he has scored this many runs, which will contain the opposition detail and probably date. Right? You can add all also. I'm just putting a few of the things so that our objective is understanding on how do I link the Excel data with the form. Right? So this I'll call it as a date. And finally, I'll put two buttons. This command button is the buttons. So I'll have two buttons here. This command button 1, I'll give a name to it saying CMD. CMD is like a command, or probably BTN, which is a button. You write whatever you want, just for your understanding. Submit. This is the name which I am giving, just for my understanding. It's not the same thing which will be displayed here. What will be displayed here is the caption of that. This I will call it as submit. So that would be my caption that would be visible here. Right? And probably if required, the background color and everything of the button I can very well edit. This is so you can very well, based on your color sense and all, you can very well choose the quality of the button, color of the button and all that stuff. Right? So I am putting a submit button and I am also putting a cancel button. In case I do a cancel also, I should be able to do a cancel. So I will put one color to this cancel button also. This is a cancel button. So this command I'll write it as cancel. That is what will be viewed there. And the name I'll use it as BTN cancel. Right? Now, yeah, here I have to enter the details. So the player name, I have to type it. So for that I'll use a text box. So here I'll put one small text box where I should be able to enter the player name. So this text box, instead of text box 1, I'll just give a name to it as txt player name. Right? So this will be the place where I'll enter the name of the player. Then runs. Runs need not be such a big text box. runs could still be a very smaller one, right? So I'll make it as a small text box, right? So this I will call it as txt runs. So this is where I have to enter the name of the, here the player name, here the runs. So status out or not out. It's better if I put it as a radio button. You select this as out or not out. So that radio button thing, to put a radio button, first I'll choose a frame. Frame is like something which groups the data. Out and not out should be a part of the single group. So I'll put a frame here. I'll put one frame. This frame will have a title called status. Right? This frame will have a title called status. And probably within this, I'll put two radio buttons. So the first one, this is one option button. Inside that frame I'll put, this is an option button 1. For that I call it, depending on whether you call it as option button or radio button, you write your name. So RD, probably out. And even the caption also, I'll call it as out. So probably I can slightly make it smaller also. So there is one option that is coming out as out. Similarly, I'll create one more option for not out. Right? So the aesthetics of it is up to you. The look and feel, the beautiness and all. You can very well plan it out. Right? This one, again, I'll call it as RD, radio button, not out. I'm just giving a name to it. And display also, I'll make it as not out. So this thing status will look as out and not out. Only one of them can be selected at any point in time. So to make sure that I can select only one at any point in time, I'll put a frame. Otherwise, if I don't put in a frame, what can happen is both of them can be selected also, which has no meaning. So wherever I have to group my data, especially in case of this radio button and all, a frame will be a much better helpful thing. So that's where I am selecting the status as a radio button and putting a frame around it and putting two option buttons inside it. The opposition, it would be better if I have it as a drop down. Right? So to make sure that I have a drop down, there are 2-3 things I would do. Probably the list of all the countries I will create what all are possible. So let's say I'll select all the countries to start with. Right? I'll select because all the existing countries and probably paste it into this location somewhere. Right? And remove the duplicates. So these are the different countries that are there. And probably I don't need this also. So what I'll do is with all these existing countries, I create one name. I create one alias name for this entire location. Right? How do I do that? In Excel, in the formulas, I'll go to a define name. Once I select this location, I go to the define name and I simply say country. Anything to that. So there is one alias that is created to it. Whenever I say, see, wherever I am, even if I am here, right, if I simply select country, it will come to that sheet. It will come to that sheet and it will do the selection like this. That is what is the advantage of the alias. Now what I'll do is, here I'll come back to my code. Here I'll just pull these things a little bit down, looking congested a little bit. Even this will be pulled a bit down. Right, I can pull this a bit down, position a bit down, so that I can create it much better. So here I'll put it as a drop down. Combo box is what is called as a drop down. So here I'll put one combo box. Now what is the input data into this combo box? The name which we have created, country, the alias name which we have created, I will write it as a part of the row source to that, the source of that data. I'll simply say country. So all the things that are there as a part of that country will be displayed in the drop down here. Getting it? And of course the date, again I'll create it as another text box itself, a person to enter the date. So I'll create another text box here. Probably this I call it as txt date. Right, and this one also, let me name it better, combo box. So I say CB opposition. This is what are my data. Now let's just simply run it. File not found. Okay. Which file not found? Oh, player T data is what I have written here. Player data is the name, right? It is showing player T data that show. That's where it is giving file not found. Oh, but still it is giving the same. Okay, now in this form, if I run this form, I'll actually get it like this, where I have to enter the data. Once I enter the data, probably now I have to start linking it. If someone clicks on submit, I have to say, put it into the Excel sheet. If someone says cancel, don't do it, anything there. Now even if you see, this will allow you to enter some data, right? Either you can go from out to not out or something. Here if you see the drop down, it will contain the list of all the countries, and you can enter the date and do a submit. Right now when you are doing a submit or a cancel, nothing is happening because there is nothing with that. No, nothing you have mentioned about submit or cancel. So that is where now we'll start writing for each of them what to do in case of both of them. So for the first thing I'll say, for cancel I'll write something. What is that I am saying for cancel? Close that form. Right? So the closing is unload. The word for closing is unload. This particular form is actually called as me. The current form is actually called as me. So when I say cancel, when I click on cancel, actually that form should get closed. Now let's try this out. This is shown. When I click on cancel, it should get closed. That form got closed. Right? Then similarly, now for submit I have to write some code. It has to update that particular Excel sheet. Correct? So I'll say, so when I click on submit, it says button submit underscore click. These are events. These are what are typically called as events. When I told you, so only when I click on submit, this should happen. When I click on, so when something is triggered, something should happen. Those are called as events. Now, when I click on submit button, what should happen? Right? Now I'll say the basic thing that has to happen is the Excel sheet. First of all, you go to the sheet 1 of the Excel sheet. So I'll say sheets, sheet 1 dot select. The first thing, the sheet 1 has to be selected. Count how many rows of data already exists. Correct? So I'll say, because it has to paste here. The next record has to be pasted here. So it has to find how many rows of data is already existing, so that it can do the next, it can go to the next record and it can do the pasting. Right? So that's where I'll say dim last row as probably long, because my data could be bigger also. So that's where I'll say last row is equal to, we'll use that range A 10 lakhs, that end formula which we have used yesterday. A 10 lakhs dot end Excel up dot row. So I'll get the last row value. This is the last row value. Now what I'll do, cells last row plus 1, because last row is the last active row. Go to that next row. Last row plus 1 comma 1 dot select. So it will select the first blank row. It will select the first blank row. That is where the pasting should start. So that will become the active cell. So I'll say active cell dot value is equal to whatever is the form. So txt, or probably you can say form name first of all. What is your form name? Person data or player data is your form name. Player data dot, that's your form name. Player data dot txt player name, whatever is the text you have entered in the player name, dot value. It will update. Then similarly, runs is in the second next cell. Active cell dot offset 0 comma 1, the next column. Right? Active cell dot offset 0 comma 1 dot value is equal to player data dot txt runs, whatever is the runs, whatever is entered in the runs column or runs UI, you just enter that value. Now the next thing I have to enter is status, which is out or not out kind of thing. That has to be entered here, which is in the C column. So that's where I say active cell dot offset 0 comma 2 dot value. But yeah, this is if the out is selected, this has to be entered as OUT. If not out is selected, it has to be entered as not out. So that's where I say if RD, or if the player data dot RD Where is that RD? R. Let me just remove this part so that it will view much better. If the player data dot RD out is true, then if someone has selected RD out, then I am saying active cell dot offset 0, 2, right? Offset 0, 2 dot value is equal to out. If someone has selected out in that UI, write it as out in that cell. Else active cell dot offset 0, 2 dot value is equal to not out. Depending on whether you have selected out or not out, you will write it as out or not out in the Excel sheet. In the form, probably you might have selected out or not out. If you have selected out, then you will write it as out in the Excel sheet. Otherwise, you will write it as not out in the Excel sheet. That's one more thing. Then the next thing you have to look at is the radio button part. Right? In the form, the next thing you have is the radio button part. So, which has to be updated probably here, the position in the I column, which is of active cell 8 columns to the right from the active cell. Right? So, that's where I will write active cell dot offset 0, 8 dot value is equal to combo box player data, that's the form name, dot CB, oh, it's not CB, CB opposition dot value. Whatever you select in the combo box, that value has to be written in the active cell offset 0, 8, which is here. Similarly, in the date, you write it here. Right? So, the same thing I will say active cell dot offset 0, 10, which is in that K column. Value is equal to player data dot txt date dot value. You update it to that location. Right, now let's see how it updates. Right, now if I run this user form, this is what is the user form. Now I enter, okay, this is the name of the player. He has scored these many runs. He is not out. And let's say this is against New Zealand. And on 20th July 2012. Right? Submit. Okay, it has given, oh, New Zealand is not coming properly. Vamsidhar has come better. 50, not out, date. Only the New Zealand is not coming properly. Why is it? Oh, it's not 0.8, 0,8. Right, so let's do a cancel here. In the code, it's not 0.8, it is 0,8. Now it should come better. right? XYZ is the name of the player. 11 runs out. Let's say against Australia, 20th July 2012. XYZ 11 out, Australia 20th July 2012. Right? So that's how you can actually create it through a form and you can get the data entry done. Right? And probably you can give this as a part of any, so you can create the form as big as possible and all that, so that even that Excel sheet is hidden off. So when the person looks at it, he looks at the form, he enters the data into the form, and probably after that, let's say once all these are entered, for the second person, it's better you remove these details, right? For the next player whom I am entering, so what I'll do again is, after this entire entry is over, right? After the entire entry is over, I'll clear all of them. I'll clear all of them, saying, okay, player data dot txt date equal to blank. So then similarly, player data dot txt player name equal to blank. Clear it, so that you can enter the next guy's data. That's it. Right? Player data dot txt runs is equal to blank. Player data dot cb opposition equal to blank. Player data dot rd not out equal to blank, and similarly player data dot rd out is equal to blank. All of them you are changing them to blank, so that the next player's data you can update. So this is like a step-by-step process. You just need to visualize something, and based on that you will do it. Now this is a blank data, right? You will enter the next game. Right? You submit and all the entire thing is going off. Now you can enter a fresh data, and here also in the Excel sheet you are seeing that the data is getting entered out. So you can very well plan out doing or updating your data in the Excel sheet without actually getting into the Excel sheet. You can update your Excel sheet through a form like this. You can create as much good form as possible, as much good looking kind of a form as possible, and you can update the data into the form like this. Right? So you can very well think of what all you would like to add, which location. So at the end, just linking this with linking the Excel sheet with the form. So sometimes you may feel instead of allowing a person directly to enter the data into the Excel sheet, it would be better if I allow him to enter it at the form layer, because probably you may make the form more interactive, but the Excel sheet may not be as interactive as possible. So entering the data at the form level looks much more better rather than entering it at an Excel sheet level. So such kind of thing also you can create using a VBA. This kind of thing is not possible at all through Excel. It is possible only through a VBA. So some of the activities which cannot be handled through Excel can very well be handled through VBA, something like this. Right? So you can create as good user forms as possible by the usage of this VBA code. Fine.